execution of Nazis who massacred 204 Poles, a historical narrative. When Nazi Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, the defeat of the Polish army did not satisfy the ambitions of the occupiers. For the German authorities, conquest was only the beginning. They believed the nation could not truly be controlled unless its spirit was destroyed, and to destroy that spirit meant eliminating those who carried knowledge, influence, and memory. From the first weeks of occupation, secret lists were prepared, and names were quietly marked for removal. Professors, priests, politicians, journalists, lawyers, former officers, and cultural figures were identified as threats not because of what they had done, but because of what they represented. In Warsaw and surrounding regions, arrests began silently. Men were taken from their homes in the middle of the night, pulled away from universities, churches, and offices, or removed directly from the cells of Pawiak Prison. Families were told their loved ones were being transferred, interrogated, or sent to labor camps. None were informed that the decisions about life and death had already been made. Trucks left the prison gates and drove north, away from the city, into the quiet of the forest. The place chosen for these killings was Pawiak, a forest near Warsaw that offered isolation and secrecy. There, prisoners were forced to dig deep pits in the sandy soil. German guards watched as the work was completed, and once the graves were ready, many of those who had dug them were executed on the spot. The forest was meant to erase all traces, to swallow both bodies and truth. In June 1940, the largest execution took place. 204 Polish civilians were transported from Pawiak Prison to Pawiak Forest. Among them were respected national leaders, university professors, athletes, and ordinary citizens accused without evidence. They were led to the edge of the graves with their hands tied, some blindfolded, others staring directly at the men who would kill them. There were no trials, no final words, and no mercy. Gunfire echoed to the trees as firing squads carried out the sentences. Those who survived the first shots were finished at close range. The bodies were dragged into the pits and buried under layers of soil. After the killings, German forces worked carefully to hide what had happened. The ground was leveled, young trees were planted, and civilians were forbidden to enter the area. Official records listed the victims as missing or transferred to unknown locations. The forest was intended to become a lie that could never be challenged. Yet the truth did not disappear. Local villagers and forest workers observed what they could and memorized the locations of the graves. Members of the Polish underground quietly passed information from person to person, preserving details that could not be written down. Even under occupation, memory resisted fear. When the war ended in 1945 and Nazi Germany collapsed, investigators returned to Pawiak. Mass graves were uncovered, and bodies were exhumed one by one. Many were identified through clothing, documents, and personal belongings. Bullet wounds and bound hands left no doubt about how they had died. What the forest had hidden for years was finally exposed to the world. Responsibility for the Pawiak massacre led back to the highest levels of the occupation authorities. Governors, Gestapo commanders, and SS officers had planned and approved the executions. These were not random acts of violence, but carefully organized crimes carried out under official orders. After the war, several of the men responsible were captured and brought before courts in Poland. Evidence was overwhelming, drawn from documents, witness testimony, and the graves themselves. The trials ended with death sentences for key perpetrators. They were executed by hanging, not in secrecy, but openly under law. Unlike their victims, their names were recorded, their crimes spoken aloud, and their deaths acknowledged as punishment rather than disappearance. Today, Pawiak is no longer a hidden forest. It is a cemetery and a memorial. White crosses stand over the graves of those who were murdered because they represented the future of their nation. Silence remains, but it is no longer the silence of fear. It is the silence of remembrance. The massacre at Pawiak began with lists and ended in mass graves. It concluded not with victory for the killers, but with the exposure of their crimes and the execution of those who believed they could murder a people's soul and remain unseen. History proved them wrong.